Dave. How are you doing?
Very well, Sueanne.
Good. So today we are going to look at rule number 5 in Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, an Antidote for Chaos. So I'm going to put on my prop here, and I'm going to read you a quote from rule number 5.
Super.
And then we will chat about it.
Discourse and discussion.
Healthy discourse. So this is on page 120 for those of you who have not read Jordan Peterson's book. Bullying at the sheer and often terrible intensity of the schoolyard rarely manifests itself in grown-up society. The reason why this particular quote stuck out for me is grown-ups today are not really setting the example, and we're seeing too much of the bullying from grown-ups in social media, in the business world. And I want to understand, is that statement true? From the perspective of his experience as a psychologist and as somebody who's invested in the good nature of what it means to be a good person, and how is this opposite to chaos when it contributes to the chaos?
Do you agree with the statement?
I'm not agreeing with the statement.
So what would you say the statement is more accurate? What would be a more accurate statement?
As it relates to bullying?
Yes.
I feel that bullying, and to the degree of its intensity, it shapes an individual, because I have been subjected to bullying. It shapes the individual to take on a perspective of recognizing what it is. And I feel, based on what we're seeing with everything that's going on, it's very contradictory to that. Because if we, for those of us who have been bullied, myself included, if we know what that makes us feel like, how can then this statement be made when we're seeing the opposite in some of our peers in the workplace, on social media? Where is this intense need to just vilify people without any evidence, and to make people feel small, again, without any evidence? Where is that coming from? So if we are talking about the grown-up society, if we are speaking from our experiences from bullying and knowing that we do not want to subject other people to that, why is it happening in the grown-up society if we're supposed to set the example for our children in the grown-up society?
Well, that's a pretty complex question. I will answer it this way. It's power and fear, and the way that they come together in the establishments to get ahead. And so if we combine fear, power, and lack, and then we transpose it onto the corporate ladder, you see it everywhere. That's where I believe both you and I may have experienced bullying in the office place. For anyone who's blind enough to say it doesn't exist, well, please go and talk to some people, because bullying is rampant. Bullying is something that we're seeing online everywhere. We're seeing the dismissive attitude, the canceling attitude, that the way of writing people off so fervently online is almost like the growing flower of planting the bully seeds in the park, in the playground for children. And so children are definitely being exposed to so many different types of bullying now, and that's becoming the norm. And it's really sad. And if you can have the bravery, which again is a chapter that Jordan Peterson talks about, is to potentially find ways to stand up to the bullying. Yet what tends to happen in my reality is then the bullied becomes the bully. And so it becomes a vicious circle round and round. And so that's a little bit of the experience with this chapter, which I'm going to read one more time for you, because I'd love your feedback on it with this as the context. Rule 5, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them.
Yes.
What's your conversation with the children about bullying?
So the conversation with children with bullying is respect each other, respect yourself, respect each other. And so as a parent, when I saw situations where, with my two, where one tries to get the upper hand, it's always for me, it was interrupting and getting them to see you need to share in this situation. Yes, you have time to play with your toy because it is yours. I acknowledge that it's yours, but there's also time where you need to share with your sibling. And so in learning how to navigate that, they have learned how to interact with their peers in the schoolyard. And as they're now becoming young adults, they're learning how to play that or do that negotiating with their circle of friends. And so for me, with the bullying, if you have a situation where a child associates, well, I can, I can strike out, I can hit, I can yell, and this is what is going to get me what I want, regardless of the situation or the harm that that child is causing another child, then you're getting into a situation where they make that association that if I continue to act this way, I'm going to get everything I want all the time. And this is where I feel the author is saying, when you have that kind of a situation, you're either, whether you're the guardian or the parent, you're going to be in a situation where you're actually embarrassed by that child. And so the earlier you teach the child about self-respect and the respect of others and what they have, then the likelihood of them growing up to be self-respecting adults is greater.
I'm going to repeat the quote just for us both to give our added perspective. Rule 5, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Is there something that if your child was doing that you would be in the space of disliking them? What would be
Yes,
one or
as a parent,
yes, what would be one or two of them so that people can get a gleam on where you set your boundaries? And then I'll be able to maybe share one or two, and then we can bring this lovely conversation to some completion. Yet, what would be one or two behaviors that you would definitely say that goes outside of the boundaries?
for me, it's hitting. If I see one of the siblings hitting the other sibling or hitting another cousin or something like that, it's like, nope, there's not even time out here. It's like, okay, we're gonna stop this right now. What for me as a parent, I from when they were very young, set guidelines around consequences that were age appropriate, that they made the association. So if I hit one of my siblings, oh, guess what? Mom is going to do this. And they may not have learned from the first time, but guess what? On the third attempt, they understood that when mom said no hitting, the consequences were put in place. And so by reinforcing those age appropriate consequences, they began to understand their hitting is out of bounds, no hitting.
Cool. For me, again, in the chapter, Jordan goes on to explain a little bit about this is about education, this is about guidance, and it is about setting some discipline. The one that was sacred in my space was encouraging my son to show respect to his parents, his grandparents, particularly elders. And so to have a sort of decorum and have a kindness to the grandparents, particularly, to reach out, to be helpful. My son had a little bit of the luxury where one set of his grandparents didn't speak English, so he would take them around and be their translator, Japanese and English. And I really took a lot of pride in that. And I think it helped him with self-esteem and self-confidence. And now that he's in Canada, I just encouraged him to be nice to his grandparents, even though he doesn't necessarily have a lot in common with his granddad, for instance. He can still be kind, and he can cook, and he can be caring. And that kindness component is sort of the boundary I set for hoping my son would show that to his grandparents. So if we bring this rule 5, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them, what would be your wrap and sizzle on this chapter?
It's pretty much what we've all been taught. Treat those as you would like to be treated. And you treat your children in the way that you want them to treat you. And it goes back to what we said earlier, self-respect and respect of others. And once they have that understanding, they will have a sense of confidence and a knowledge and a knowing, and a standard for themselves.
Let me add one extra little question. Since we went into bullying, what would be your advice to somebody in the office place right now if they are being bullied? What would be one or two really cool or effective strategies that you might share with somebody who might be in a situation where they're being bullied?
So in a situation in the office where someone is being bullied, start documenting the incidences. So keep a log of when, the dates and the time in which those incidents are happening, and document if they are escalating. Once you've got that log, your next step is to find somebody in the office that you feel you can trust. And whether it's somebody in HR or and especially someone who is senior to you. And excuse me. And once you have that support, then the next steps would be to figure out and plan out what are those mitigating steps to take to protect you, and also to get that other individual to make them aware that their actions are making you uncomfortable. And once there is agreement with that, then put in place those policies. The company has to put in policies to ensure that those behaviors are not repeated, and the company has to stand behind those policies to ensure that other employees are not put at risk as well.
That's a great 1, 2, 3. 1, start writing journal, be specific, be clear. 2, seek out some allies, preferably in HR, but sometimes HR won't be the best person to do it. You might have to go sideways, down, or up to be able to develop some allies to actually either confront the individual or bring it to HR or even higher to escalate it. And number 3, develop a plan that can actually educate and perhaps even remove the person who's being the bullying. I have had experiences with it. It's worked, yet I believe that those people in a bullying situation often feel helpless. They get themselves into a cycle that they say, oh, I've tried everything. No, you haven't tried everything. You really need to be curious, resilient, and document and be brave.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Sueanne. That's really great. I hope that people who have listened and watched today, they get this opportunity to explore ways to do not let your children do anything that make you dislike them, and ways to engage bullying.
Thanks, Dave.
Have a great day.